Hi, everyone. Welcome to Two Bald Guys Talking Safety. I'm Langdon DeMint.
And I'm Julian Taylor.
And welcome to our podcast.
Hello, and welcome to Two Bald Guys Talking Safety. My name's Julian Taylor, and where's Langdon? Today we were going to talk about data.
It's showtime.
Hey, buddy.
Yeah. Similar to, Beetlejuice, thought I would just magically appear at the word of data.
So it's that time of year again, Langdon. It's spooky.
Cult, not really cult, but classic favorite. It seems like all households now.
Yeah.
Halloween.
It's Halloween. Is the golf cart out? Cart? Have you brushed the cobwebs off it?
I certainly have. We were going to add a little Halloween decor. I've added a speaker to it so I can play some, loud Halloween music. Michael Myers.
Yeah.
For those of you that don't know. Yeah, we're ready. How about you? Are you going to go trick-or-treating this year?
No.
You should. You should go trick-or-treating at South Cave.
I turn into the Grinch early, don't I? So when it comes to trick or treat, I love opening the door and saying, "Treat, please," and watching their little faces as they try to work it out and decide what to do. Yeah,
you should tell them trick. Perform a trick. That's what you should do.
Perform a trick. Yes. Yeah. And if it's good, I'll give you a treat.
No. Yeah.
There you go.
I know.
Following on the theme, I think we were going to talk about the nightmare on Data Street.
Oh. The nightmare on Data Street. It's a scary thing. Before we jump into that, there's one thing I don't know that I've ever asked you that I feel like I should ask.
Are you ready, everybody? Because I don't know what's coming here.
It's got to be quick. So the first thing that comes to your head, favorite Halloween candy, go.
Chupa Chups.
The sucker?
Sucker.
Chupa Chups?
Yeah.
Really?
Yes.
A Chupa Chub is your favorite?
Yeah.
Yeah. That caught me off guard. Oh, would have never guessed.
Langdon, first thing that comes to your mind?
It's a mixture of M&M and Heath Bar. I can't. It's both. Yeah.
I've got to say, actually, peanut M&Ms. Yeah.
Those are good.
Yeah.
Chupa Chubs.
Yeah.
I would.
You'd never.
I would have never.
Yeah.
No.
I was doing favourite karaoke songs the other day with somebody at work, and my favourite karaoke song caught them by surprise as well. I like to keep people on their toes.
Man, that's good. That's strong.
Yeah.
No, but
we'll do favourite karaoke songs another day.
I like it. But yes, the nightmare of unknown data on Data Street.
So we're going to make this a two-parter, aren't we?
I think that would be wise.
Yeah.
Since there's a lot we could go with this.
Yeah. We wanted to talk about data. We wanted to talk about how you can use your data to drive better compliance, but then thinking about what the two bald guys like to talk about. Not just compliance, how do we start to strive for excellence and just better health and safety? But we wanted to start with the nightmare side first because it is Halloween and we needed a cheap pun and a cheap alignment to Halloween. So we're going with that first. But it's a real challenge, isn't it? Because people do often have gremlins in their data.
Truly. Well, imagine it's kind of like, this time of year, you like to go to haunted houses and the scare factors and just think about it. A dark house, a dark warehouse beside a picturesque crystal lake where Jason might come out of. But we have all these processes, but we don't have good data. How horrifying would that be?
It would be horrifying.
We can't learn anything.
I think really importantly, we should think about the trap. So what's the trap that we could fall into when we're thinking about trying to get good data?
That's true. That's, and I think
that's
where...
The doesn't really help me here because it needs to be a plural, doesn't it, really? Because I think there are traps.
Traps.
Yeah.
It is scary when you think about the fog that can approach. Yeah, thank you. Because we do talk about... we talk about data, and sometimes it's unknowingly talking about data and insights, and a lot of the aspects that we talk about, that we think of from a EHS perspective, right? It's very much what we are getting in so that we can actually use that data. And everybody gets so hung up. One of the easiest things, it's how many incidents we had, how many hazards. Well, that's great, but all that is data from what we can take in. And that's the premise of everything that we're trying to talk about. That
and the starting point is it's a really, really old analogy, isn't it? And one that's been used for a long time. But rubbish in, rubbish out really counts, doesn't it? Is the first thing to think about is, right, how are you going to collect that data? And I think a part of that consideration is trying to simplify the data fields, the data points that you're trying to collect against. So actually collect stuff that's relevant. It's interesting quite often when you're looking at the forms that people use, even for things like incident and hazard reporting, they can be overly complex, overly sort of comprehensive, to the point where actually you collect so much data, it's hard to then analyze it at the back end of a system. And once you start to drive that better engagement, and we've seen, I know in our experience, we've seen massive increases in engagement around things like hazard reporting. I know one business that we worked with went from nothing to 7,500 hazard reports. All of a sudden, if you stop to think about that, 7,500 hazard reports, how do I take that and turn it into something meaningful that I can actually use the data in a positive way? Because that's what you're doing it for at the end of the day. You're not collecting data for data's sake. You want to use it in a meaningful way, don't you?
Mm-hmm. Well, and no, that's excellent. And yeah, I've talked about the organizations I've worked with, even internally, when using a JHA, for example, and they had a very robust job hazard analysis program. Over 50,000 JHAs were in existence. And then you start thinking about, what data can we get from that? I think about past where I've worked internally managing health and safety, and we had great JHAs. We had great insights into what was coming. But what the problem we noticed was, we really didn't have a very good mechanism for always reporting the incidents. It was a global company. We had incidents from, your typical warehouse factory type. But we had a lot of people external, a lot of people that were going out. So we had the office settings, and if people were traveling, and it's easy to go back to, but infectious diseases, that was perfect. If somebody gets sick and it came from a work trip and then they spread it to others, I mean, it's, right. It's very difficult. So I think it's all about, and you kind of hit that early on, if we're not getting very good initial insights, or even really knowing what to look for, we go down a data rabbit hole of problems. We've talked before, not to totally deviate yet in the conversation, but talking about SIFs. I mean, all that really, it's about data and understanding what is happening in the past that's already happened, so that you can start restructuring it at the forefront. So I think when we think about data, when we're thinking about insights, I mean, it's crucial to even know, what are we wanting to collect? What should we be collecting? Because you said it, with good in, good out, bad in, bad out. It's so very much.
It's a great starting point, isn't it? And I mean, immediately you're talking. I hear you talking about 50,000 JHAs, and the thought that immediately goes through your mind is, how much use is that volume of information? Do people actually read them? Do people look at them? Do they draw insights in terms of, I suppose, hazards or the highest level of risk across an organization? There's so much you could draw from it, but actually sometimes if you've got an overwhelming amount of data, how easy is it to actually get that data to shine through?
Yeah. And I think that's where I get, I know I've used that example before, but that's where I get a little curious, maybe is the proper word, or I don't know what it is. But we in the States, for example, we're very thorough in what you should have, right? Risk assessments, hazard analysis, understanding you have the job, prepared that whatever you're about to do, you've taken all that into account. The UK straight specifies risk assessments be created. And to me, this isn't trying to go down a US, UK, but that is one of those things. If we don't watch out, like the UK, have you done a risk assessment on that? Well, no, but I wonder if it goes down that rabbit hole of then you have so many of these. It's great on the forefront, but how do you do anything with it? And I think that's where we have to watch out as far as in general health and safety when we think about it, especially when we're talking about data. We have to be cognizant of ensuring that we are looking and trying to manage the right things so that we can get, I mean, it's to what you said, rubbish in, rubbish out. I mean, it really goes back to that, so that we can ensure that we are getting the proper needed elemental changes on the outside.
A really good reflection is what value does this add to our management approach, and what value does it add in terms of outputs? And if it doesn't, there's a really good argument to say stop doing it, and focus in on the things that add value. So what activities do you really want to be able to share information with people around, for example? So you talked about risk assessments. How do we make it so it's really easy to consume that information and use it in a practical way to sort of keep people safe? Yeah. We want people to report hazards, keep it simple so that actually we can draw some sort of insights from those hazards that we can go and do something about it. We can make the organization safer. So a really good starting point is, what are we collecting and why are we bothering to collect it in the first place? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And I think it's just to that point, when this topic came across, it was thinking about data. It was thinking about it from also a compliance standpoint and how we can ensure that those are running hand in hand. How can we use that to help? And it's challenging because I'm going to Jekyll and Hyde this one.
He's thinking, people. I'm just going to say he's thinking. He's got his head tilted. He's thinking.
I know. I'm doing the Zeus, but I'm also going to pull a little Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde here. You have two sides of the same coin, or different coins. Who knows? You have a compliance standpoint that says I have to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And it is checkbox exercises, right? You have a health and safety program. If you have chemicals, you have a chemical management, hazardous communication. I mean, so you can check all those. And then when all those are checked, you're able to look and see, okay, what data are we getting from from those initial programs? Do we have the people putting in hazards when they see them? Are we getting out? So you have compliance, which then can lead to getting that data out. But then, there's all kinds of, I really oversimplified that. But then on the flip side, you have data that if I'm not getting good data in, how does it tell me where I am from a compliance standpoint? And conversely, it might not tell me anything in regards to compliance, because I might have all the proper programs, procedures, processes. I might have all those. So I've checked all my regulatory boxes. But if I'm not getting proactive data, and it really falls into our maturity model, am I just compliance checking the boxes, or am I trying to be a little more proactive in learning? So, and that's why we've kind of decided to split this up, because very much I think there are some differentials that we do have data, and when everything is running in what I'm going to say, quote unquote, good practices or best practices, you see that they do play a role into each other. But when they don't, I think you see a lot of a lot of speed bumps or beaver dams in the middle of the stream, which the water's flowing, but it's not flowing very well.
All good points. And I think it's thinking about some of the practical things that you're trying to do with that data, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And again, you talked about the sort of US against UK. One thing that I think absolutely seems to be a bit of a nightmare, going back to our theme, is that annual OSHA reporting. So talk to me about what's some of the challenges people face around OSHA reporting, and why do you think they face those challenges?
I think people, there's a lot. When done properly, caveat, I suppose, if you're kind of managing that every month anyways, or when an incident, not even every month, but when something occurs, you're staying abreast of it, it makes your beginning of the year a lot more seamless. And then you get what, you post you post all the applicable regulatory documents, you get all that. So that's when it's easy, so to speak. But to me, the challenge, it always goes back to the tool of the process of how you're doing it. Meaning, am I using pen and paper? And I'm not trying to be salesy, but any software tool that is good will help simplify processes. To me, that's some of the biggest changes or challenges, I should say. It's all those difficulties in, or even I've decided to use the software tool. Well, it doesn't give me the proper amount of lost days. Well, then I have to recalculate that. So anytime you start thinking about creating a cumbersome process, that is, to me, the most challenging part of annual OSHA reporting.
Simplify the process. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's when you start seeing, because it's easy for, if there's a serious injury or not a serious injury, if there's an incident, it's easy to record that, put that on my document, write it, go on. It's easy if it's serious to report that. I have you lost an eye and I need to report that. I'm just going to do it right off the bat, do it in the time allotted. Those are kind of the easy things. But if I'm reporting them here on my Excel and I don't have a means of collating all that or doing it when the yearly review comes up, that's when you start seeing challenges. And if you have multiple sites, and that's why anything that, we talk about, you do all the time, keeping it simple, anything we can do to streamline, that prevents a nightmare. And
fragmenting the systems is a really good point you've kind of brought out there, which is, if your data sits in different places, it just immediately becomes a real pain to actually be able to pull that data together. So don't have your data sitting in multiple places. The other nightmare I'm thinking about is Friday the 13th.
I was thinking the same one. No joke.
Yeah. What are most safety guys or safety people get asked to do on a Friday or spend their time doing on a Friday? And it's putting together that classic board report, isn't it? And the horror stories we hear from that around the amount of time that people spend. Sometimes it's hours, even sometimes it's days to try and put that sort of report together for senior leadership. And again, what value do they get out of it?
Yeah.
Is it really worth the investment in time? If it is, how do we, to your point, simplify the process so actually it's seamless and it's easy? Because really, why do you want to be a safety professional? Is it to be sitting at a desk putting a report together, or is it coaching, spending time with people, training them, helping people to just do things better? So I think, to me, let's take Friday the 13th out of the equation and make it really simple and make it really easy to generate not just board reports, but in general, better data for people to use in a more constructive and a more positive way. Yeah.
Well, I think to that point, there's nothing like a Texas data massacre instead of the chainsaw massacre. Thank you. It's and what I mean by that is, something you just said, that's totally accurate. Trying to collate everything that's happened, if you're having to give it to management or if you're doing a weekly report. But how often do you get, maybe let's say it's good data that you send it on, but what is that actually telling us?
And what do they use it for?
That to me is kind of the crux, I think, that we get caught up on a lot, because it's easy to say, okay, say Jules in Manchester, he had 5 incidents in the last 2 weeks. Here in the States, in Nashville, we had 6. We had that. That's great. How many hazards do we have reported? Oh, okay, we had 8, 4, and 3, whatever. But what does that actually tell us? It just tells us things that have happened. Is it telling us, well, and that's one thing why we've talked about telematics for fleets. I think hard braking, hard acceleration, for example. What do those tell us? Well, hard braking can mean I was distracted. I was on my phone. I was driving too fast. I wasn't paying attention in general. I was looking at the trees. I just got a new car, a new work van. I was being a little preppy. I was drinking coffee. I mean, there's a lot of things, actually, when you think about the purpose of telematics from that scenario that it can shed light on. I think we need to rethink data insights as well and think about, what does this actually tell us? Well, it can tell us that we need to refocus on some of these areas. It can tell us that we've experienced some failures. We've had some hazards reported, but they were actually not even associated with that. So what are we doing to try to change that status quo?
And the reality is, isn't it, we just live in a world where there is more and more and more data available to us. So what we've got to do is we've got to start saying, right, we've got to become pretty good at saying, how can we use that data as effectively as possible? And again, something I was thinking just as you were talking there was with the telematics is add more value to our organizations. So again, the other side of that I was thinking was, we can then train our drivers to drive better, to drive more effectively. Knock-on effect of that is actually they might drive more economically, because actually if they're not hard braking and hard accelerating, actually that starts to produce better fuel economy. So you can start to show more business benefits from using more data points, but they can also have an impact on safety. Yeah. So you want to go from speak no data to getting your data to speak for you. You see what I did there?
I like that.
Yeah.
Well, and that's, I think, 100%, because the real Amityville horror is not having the right data. I mean, that's where it all. Yeah. And I think that's what a lot of what we've hit on. That's what, when you're able to review that helps you to realize what is missing. It helps you to realize what's working well, but also what's really missing. I was working with an organization, and and you'll see where I'm going with this. They were doing BBS, so behavior-based safety, and I'm not a fan of BBS from the old school view of kind of it's negative. When it was founded, it was, let's basically in simple terms, let's find what's wrong. I don't like that. Humans are problems to be fixed, kind of, so to speak. That's how it was at the foundation. Most people have construed that or to a positive light, but this organization, they were working, and a lot have done it this way, but a lot of the areas, a lot of the things they were looking at, the data points they were gathering were negative. Like, what is Jules doing wrong in this? Why is he not wearing his PPE? I mean, it was all these data points that they were getting, but even that scenario, all that does is really kind of that blame and shame, and all it shows are negative aspects of data. So yes, you can spin it positive, I guess, but if you just focus on the negative data, it is difficult because you've got to totally contort that to look at the polar opposite to then find the positive of where we can learn and grow. So even when we get data, we need to make sure that we're getting insights that can actually make a difference.
And I think, again, another really good point, which is let's try and coach our people around the positive benefits of the right data. So we can talk about things like training and hazards and risk assessments and inspections, and talk about actually health and safety data points don't always have to be negative. Yeah. And for me, the Blair Witch of the whole thing, you see what I did there, is the starting point, is our people. And I've talked about this loads on the podcast. It comes back to that engagement piece, because actually if people aren't engaged, you're not going to have the data anyway, because they're not going to tell you about things. They're not going to report it. That's your ultimate horror story. Is we've got all these processes out there. We've got all these forms. We've got tools and technology, but people aren't engaged. So they don't report anything. They don't tell us about the things that are happening. They don't come up with ideas and suggestions. So again, it's got to tie into the other things that we talk about in terms of driving a good, effective safety performance. And the starting point is always people. So we've got to help our people to understand why we want them to do this.
Jeepers creepers. Let's be honest here. When you think about it, it's easy to get insights off of incidents. No matter, well, I'm not going to say no matter where you are, because there's some areas not. But for the most part, that's easy because you have to report incidents. If in the States, in the UK, most, I'll say more proactive, or however you want to say it, or cultures, it's very rare that organizations are really trying to hide incidents, because they know, you still read it. It happens. I'm not saying that, but if you hide incidents happening, sooner or later, the javel is going to come down hard on those. So those are the easy things. It's when you start thinking about how we can be more proactive, how we can be more better, so to speak. That's when it does get challenging, because we talk about hazards, or what people see, good and bad, and even those, it's hard to say that those are true leading indicators. But it's what you can look at it and think, what behaviors are we seeing? Did Jules do a start when safe? So he started actually before. That's a true leading. Did you go through a checklist before to ensure that everything was good? And I think we just have to really be cognizant about how we're working. And it's difficult because every organization is different. Every worker within an organization, safety manager, we have all these different levels of maturity. So it is challenging to be extremely introspective, to really understand what lies beneath. But when we do, that's when we can start seeing where we need to refocus.
Is that a film, What Lies Beneath? Well done.
Thank you. Well done.
I think we're probably going to draw it to a halt there for part one. We will be back. And we'll talk about more positive things. Post-Halloween, we'll talk about more positive things. We'll talk about some of the things, the constructive things that you can do to improve data collection. Think about some of the metrics that you want to be focusing in on. I've been trying to get the shining in all the way through, and I'm really struggling. Apart from I can just see the shining off your forehead.
Oh, thank you. I was going to say, we could say tune in next time for the shining light of what happens when the data is good.
That's better. You. That's a better one. Yeah.
But I do think you bring up, I think it's very good that we kind of transition. Hopefully all this information we've been talking about, it's the good, the bad of data, ensuring what you have, but very much where this conversation is going to go, it's ensuring that we're doing the right things with data, that it's helping from a compliance, from a proactive standpoint, because there's a lot of areas where we can take this to actually helping organizations.
The thing is, it is just a fundamental part of being good at safety, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's not kind of that side thing of creating reports alongside what I do as a day job. Actually, it's become far more central. So I think as safety professionals, we have to have that focus on it.
Yep.
So,
truly.
Langdon, I'm going to let you maybe try and sign us off in a slightly spooky way this time.
As you're going about your dark days in the haze of the fog, If you're walking alone in the warehouse and it's a late Thursday evening and the lights are down, there's lurky noises. Don't fear, but always remember to try to be healthy and safe and make sure ultimately, because it's dark, you watch your back out there. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Two Bald Guys Talking Safety. Don't forget to follow and subscribe wherever you stream your podcast, or you can visit us at evotix.com.
And if you've liked today's podcast or you found some value from it, we'd really appreciate it if you could head over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a review or a rating. It really means a lot to us. Thank you.
Happy Halloween!